No written records have ever been discovered to explain who built the megalithic temples in Malta. However, local traditions of the Maltese people have offered a stunning possibility. They claim that the massive structures were built by a race of giant beings who came to Earth from the stars.
There's a story that a meteorite came down from the heavens and turned into a goddess, a giant named Sansuna. And the locals, of course, were terrified of this giant. But at a place called Giantia, she started building a temple and moved stones much larger than any human could ever move and assembled this structure that was so massive. It remains to this day still a place of mystery, still a giant's construction.
When you see these cyclopean stones, some of them weighing as much as 50 tons, you can appreciate why we have the story of this giantess Sansuna.
The local legends of Sansuna may sound incredible to some. However, in the 17th century, a Maltese nobleman named Gianfrancesco Abella claimed to have found forensic evidence that these legends may have been based in fact.
In the early 1600s, Gianfrancesco Abella was living on the island of Malta, and he actually wrote about the fact that giants were involved in the construction of these sites. One of the reasons he wrote this is because he said he found bones, skulls, and even giant teeth all across the island. And there were other reports of them coming forth at this time.
In order to investigate the local legends connecting giant extraterrestrial beings to the massive structures on Malta, in 2022, ancient astronaut theorist Georgios Tsoukalos traveled to Malta's oldest megalithic structures, the temples of Gigantia on the island of Gozo. There, he met with Franz von Avendonk.
I'm Giorgio, pleasure to meet you.
An expert in Maltese history, who has lived on the island since 1991.
Look at this. I mean,
Gigantic.
it is gigantic. Gigantia means the giant goddess, and it makes sense why. Because right now, I feel like an ant. We are so small, and especially when you're right next to it.
It's very impressive.
And in my opinion, still a massive question mark.
There are still questions, yeah, definitely.
What can you tell us about the dating?
But when it was excavated, because we don't talk about discovery, it was always visible. People thought it was a Phoenician temple.
Okay.
Much later, they realized it must have been prehistoric. So it was put in the 2000s before Christ. Then it moves back to the 3000s. Now we're saying 3600 at least. Technology has improved, different ways of looking at things, so therefore they're getting older. They were built much earlier than we thought before.
When viewed from above, the two adjacent temples of Gigantia are designed with large apses resembling a clover leaf. Each housed an altar, and artifacts suggest a wooden roof covered the entire temple. Many of the stone blocks stand 20 feet tall, and some weigh in excess of 50 tons.
Is it possible that we've lost some type of masonry knowledge? Because you could create it using smaller stones. Clearly, this required planning, it required logistics.
Yes.
In my opinion, master builders were at work here, and mainstream archaeologists are suggesting that whoever built this did not have any writing. Well, not only would it require writing, but you have to have calculations.
And leadership.
Exactly.
With the evidence of how old or when it was built, who built it, and how it was built. Might be there, but we haven't found it yet. I can imagine that people saw this and thought this must have been the work of a giant.
Right.
Throughout the Mediterranean, you see an association with giants constructing megaliths. For instance, in Mycenaean Greece, there's a structure called the Lion's Gate. Aristotle mentioned that this construction style was called Cyclopean masonry because of the large stones. The ancient Greeks figured that only a giant called Cyclops could have had the strength to move these. The same sort of Cyclopean masonry is present in the Maltese temples as well.
These stories of giants have been an integral part of our entire human history since the beginning of time. Now, this is not something that the ancient astronaut theory came up with. So, is it possible that the reason why we have these stories of these giants is because at one point they actually existed? And the answer to that is yes.